Space Congress 2024. I'm Manhar Rashid on behalf of SIA-INDIA and India Space Congress take a great pleasure in welcoming all our eminent dignitaries, distinguished delegates, subject expert speakers, senior government officials, participants and friends to India Space Congress 2024. We are happy to be here and are looking forward to an amazing day filled with great ideas and thoughts, promising to give you all a wonderful experience. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, let's begin today's proceedings with this amazing first session of Day 1 of India Space Congress 2024 on Satcom and Spectrum Management with the topic Sky Bridges, Satellite Broadband and Satellite Mobile Convergence for Universal Connectivity. The session explores how satellite broadband and satellite mobile technologies revolutionize global connectivity and chart a path towards a more connected future. I'm honored to invite on stage the distinguished chair of this session, Shri Sudhir Gupta, former Secretary, TRAI, to kindly grace the stage. Welcome, sir. I also have the privilege in inviting our session panelists, one after the other. Ladies and gentlemen, with your huge round of applause, please welcome Mr. Shivaji Chatterjee, CEO, President and MD, Hughes India. Mr. Gaurav Kharod, Regional VP, Asia Pacific Intelsat. Mr. Harsh Verma, Vice President, SES. Mr. Jitender Ahuja, Head Product and Solutions, NELCO. And Mr. Vikram Tiwathia, Deputy Director General, COAI. He'll be joining us shortly. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the time duration for this session is approximately 1 hour 30 minutes, including the keynote addresses, opening and closing remarks by the chair, presentations by our panelists. So I request everyone to please stick to the timings. And now I would hand over the session to our distinguished chair, Shri Sudhir Gupta ji, for the opening remarks. Sir, I have Mr. Sudhir Gupta here on the dais. I also invite Mr. Peng Zhao, VP Policy and Regulatory, GSOA. He's going to join us virtually. And I also request him to please be ready with his keynote address. Thank you very much.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's session on Sky Bridges, Satellite Broadband and Satellite Mobile Convergence for Universal Connectivity. I am the chair of the session, and it is my pleasure to introduce the exciting and highly relevant topic. Over the next 90 minutes or so, 90 minutes or maybe 70, 75 minutes, whatever time is left, we will explore how satellite broadband and satellite mobile connectivity are revolutionizing the global connectivity and charting a path towards universal connectivity. In our increasing digital world, the importance of universal connectivity cannot be overestimated. Access to reliable internet services is no longer a luxury or a prerogative of the rich, but a necessity vital for economic growth, education, healthcare, and countless other aspects of our life. Yet despite significant advancement in technology, still there are billions of people all over the world who lives in remote and underserved regions who are still remain unconnected. Satellite technology is hence a crucial technology in providing communication service where traditional infrastructure is lacking. As you all know, in our country, since the opening of telecom sector in somewhere in 94, 95, mobile technology has slowly become predominant, and say by 2008 or 2009, the landline became sort of, not fully, but sort of extinct, and the mobile phones were there with more than 90% of the people. Today we have around 1.1 billion mobile connections and around 850 broadband. But majority of these broadbands are on mobile only. They are not on, unlike other developed countries where most of the broadband or majority of the broadband are on fixed line or the fiber. In India, it is the mobile which provides the broadband connectivity. Till few years back, satellite, because it was primarily GEO, was not considered a very viable alternative to broadband or voice-to-voice communication because of its high cost and high latency. But in last few years, with the advent of the new technologies like LEO and MEOs coming in, the satellite is also becoming a viable media for providing connectivity or communication. Earlier it was primarily for the disaster relief and for hilly terrain only. But now with these technologies coming in and high reduction in the latency, which is very crucial as far as the data communication is concerned for 4G, 5G, 6G, the satellite technologies are also becoming a viable media. In the recently concluded WRC 23, some very important decisions were taken, like allocation of more spectrum in satellite transmission, establishing a more stable and transparent regulatory framework for space services, etc. So you see, world over, as if you in the inaugural address also, few speakers had pointed out, suddenly the satellite is becoming the to-go technology, and everyone wants to get into this. SIA-INDIA has also released a white paper at the inaugural that delves into various aspects related to broadband technologies and the significant role of the space sector in enhancing connectivity. It highlights the growth drivers such as digital initiative, the rise of IoT, and technological advancement like low Earth orbit satellites, the challenges of high cost and latency issues, etc. So, ladies and gentlemen, in this session, I hope we will be delving into several key issues like innovative solutions, where the speakers will probably talk about the advancement in satellite broadband and how these innovations are being deployed to enhance global internet coverage, convergence of technologies as satellite and mobile technologies are converging to create hybrid networks that offer enhanced connectivity solutions, challenges and future direction, where finally we'll try to address the challenges faced in developing these technologies and consider the future directions for achieving universal connectivity. We are fortunate to have with us a panel of esteemed experts from the industry. They will share the insights, experience and vision for a future where seamless connectivity is a reality for all. Thank you.
You asked me to start my keynote? Sorry, so I can't really hear you when you speak in that microphone. Do you want me to start? Okay, great. Yeah. So hopefully you can hear me well and you can see me. First of all, thank you so much to TRAI-INDIA for the invitation. It's unfortunate I cannot be there physically this time, but really wishing you all a very successful India Space Congress 2024. So my name is Peng. I'm representing GSOA. GSOA is a global satellite operator association. We have approximately 70 global member companies providing a unified voice for the satellite ecosystem. We represent both operators, but also manufacturers and also launch providers. I think, as Gupta just said in his opening remarks, like despite the recent technological advances, there are still 2.7 billion people not online today globally due to access, cost, or usability challenges. And those are especially in the underserved areas. And this really stark divide is driving our vision for the future of the connectivity. We think that to achieve universal connectivity, the future lies in the convergence of terrestrial and non-terrestrial networks like satellites. For example, 6G aims to tightly integrate this into a unified multi-access architecture optimized for efficiency, resilience, and capabilities across use cases. So while 4G and 5G use, for example, satellite backhaul to extend coverage, 6G envisions devices naturally accessing satellite networks alongside terrestrial networks, providing connectivity to everyone, everywhere, and to optimal converged solutions. So really realizing this vision requires unprecedented cross-industry collaboration, and we are witnessing this collaboration between satellites, mobile, and technology players to realize the convergence vision today. So major milestones like the 3GPP release 17 enables the non-terrestrial integration into 5G and paving the way for 6G. So GSOA is fostering this kind of a collaboration to cooperation agreement with ESA, so the European Space Agency, but also with GSMA. There's a joint commitment between the different kind of parties to harmonize the standards and advocate for policies that enable the rapid innovation cycle and market growth in this domain of direct-to-device, for example. So, however, one of the biggest challenge and enabler that needs to be addressed in this space is always the access to sufficient spectrum. This is almost crucial for all the kind of wireless industries, but especially to realize this kind of 6G satellite integration capabilities. And WRC-27 has over 80% of the agenda items related to spectrum for satellite services, and this includes agenda item 1.12 and 1.14 to allocate more mobile satellite spectrum, but also agenda item 1.13 on integrating satellite into IMT below 3 GHz. So getting supportive spectrum policies and framework in place is definitely going to maximize the benefits of this convergence for the future of the connectivity and for more universal and meaningful connectivity. So to conclude, it's really through this kind of a continued cross-industry collaboration and also policy collaboration that we can align to unleash the full potential of this integrated terrestrial and non-terrestrial network convergence. With this, I conclude my short keynote. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Peng. Our next speaker is Gaurav Kharod. He is a Regional Vice President, Asia Pacific Intelsat. He is an experienced business professional with demonstrated capacity in the satellite communication industry, skilled in sales, management, e-sales, network design, and business development across the networks and media markets. He is having an MBA in marketing.
Kharod from Intelsat. I was in the India market for more than 12, 13 years. Last couple of years, I've moved to Singapore. Now looking at the region, I'm going to make this short as an introduction. We at Intelsat, and then eventually you would have heard about the news with SES, have a roadmap and I'll refer to what Peng Zhao mentioned, have a roadmap which talks about the future of a multi-orbit 5G, 6G homogeneous network, which will combine the terrestrial network architecture of the mobile network operators and the NTN, which is a non-terrestrial network specifications which are coming up, which have come up already. I think somewhere during the course of the Q&A session with Sudhir, we will talk more about this, but at this point, I would say Intelsat, we very much are looking for the future of a roadmap which unifies satellite networks and the mobile networks as part of our unified 5G multi-orbit solution in the future. And today, while a lot of the satellite technologies that we have been using in the last several years are still proprietary in nature, as we move towards a unified global network, we would believe that there would be virtualization, there would be standardization on the satellite technology, and we look forward to the future of that in time to come. And we continue to be satellite operators across multiple orbits. We specialize in the GSOA orbit as Intelsat, but we would work with different partners across the LEO, MEO, HAPS probably, to create a multi-orbit fabric which will address different needs, as Sudhir mentioned, in terms of latency requirements, application requirements, but also a future which will have the ability for a terminal to roam, whether it's an IoT terminal or any other satellite terminal, to roam between the satellite network and the terrestrial network. So, looking at a future smart edge terminal, which will have a satellite modem virtualized, which means it can take, it's a standard hardware, which can take the satellite modem profile when it is operating on satellite. It can operate to a SIM card on a mobile network operator's network as well. And we are well down that path, and we look forward to that future with services in India, especially now that with the ages of in-space and the space policy in India, we will become an Indian operator very soon. So that's the vision that we are looking at, and of course we will talk more as Sudhir goes into Q&A. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Definitely the collection and fulfillment is the toughest part of the job in India. So Gaurav, I thought you and Harsh will come together on the podium, but maybe at next year's event. It's great to be in this panel. I think definitely Hughes has been the first in the Satcom industry in India, and we will be the last man standing. I think as a JV between Hughes and Airtel, whether Jitender, Harsh, Gaurav, all started their careers in this space, and it's great to be reunited in this panel. So I'm sure we'll have a good session, and the more fun we have, so will it be for everyone here. I see the constitution of this room, like in India today, there's more supply than demand. So there's more peers from OEMs and operators and service providers. But I think definitely what we are all seeing today in the country is a sort of almost a second lease of life. When the industry started 30 years back, Satcom was the lifeline to provide options for companies which wanted some form of reliable connectivity. And while Satcom has done and delivered everything it has, stayed relevant, but definitely the progress which has happened in the terrestrial and wireless place, both regulatorily as well as in terms of the technology, and of course companies like Bharti, Reliance, BSNL coming in and deploying infrastructure all over the country. It's an amazing job, and that's where I think when we see the industry almost being reborn, there's a regulatory change like never before. I remember we used to always say, when will the regulation change? And the TRAI chairman, Shri Sharma, used to say, like a woodpecker, you keep pecking and someday the tree will fall. Well, the tree has fallen, and I think we definitely are all here. Gaurav spoke about Intelsat forming a company in India. SES has already done it, and applying and getting authorization from InSpace directly and serving its capacity to customers directly in the country. So I never thought few years back we ever dreamt that this could happen, and maybe the only good thing from the pandemic, which happened very quickly, that this industry decided to reform. The other big element, of course, is the advent of such breakthrough technologies, not just the obvious LEO constellations, but also the advances in GEO, more capacities, and that I think is something which didn't exist in India. We just didn't have capacities. We used to always ask customers to do with less, and it's the first kind of industry which always used to push back when the customer wanted more. It's something that we all wish we were back in those days with technologies and solutions like today. But I think that is also the big exciting thing with billionaires entering this space. It has created a change in mindset. I think whether it's the end user in an enterprise, mobility, or a government regulator, they all look at this sector now as something which is bringing technology and is becoming relevant. Otherwise, I know Krishna's here, he was looking after regulatory. I think 7-8 years back in the telecom policy, there was no mention of the word satellite communication, the national policy. And we were wondering, where are we headed? I think this, from now, I think whether it's at WRC events, whether it's at I think various, I think even the, the telecom bill which passed, the main bone of contention was how do you bring Satcom into the mainstream, firstly from a policy and mindset. I think that's happening, and we'll talk more because that's still not enough. There has to be a lot more action for Satcom to become and fulfill its promise in a country like India, where the tele-density and the big telcos have really created a price proposition and reach which is unparalleled anywhere in the world. So I think the big challenge is how do we address that, and we'll discuss that through the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. Look, I'm really pleased to share the dice with past colleagues, now customers, but most importantly, friends. So yes, 2 decades of experience, right? I started my days in 99 with Hughes. We were in a backyard kind of place in Hughes Software Systems, and managing only, there was C-band. KU band was not even regularly allowed in India. I've seen those days where SES brought in a little bit of capacity in 2002, and it was such a breakthrough at that time. And to now, I think the broadband has taken a big leap, right? But I still feel that in India, the majority of the satellite projects are driven by digital inclusion or really narrowband connectivity. We've barely scratched the surface when it comes to real broadband experience to the end users. SES has enjoyed this journey and been part of this growth and reform in India. I think we're looking to the next phase in a very, very optimistic manner. You heard Deepak mention in his keynote address, our joint venture with Reliance Jio is the right step in that direction, where we feel partnering with the telco, building seamless integrated solutions with terrestrial networks is the path to our future. And we've just received end of April authorizations for both our SES-12, the high throughput geostationary satellite, as well as the mPOWER MEO constellation, and we'll be soon looking to launch services once the spectrum policy is announced. So what we see globally, because I look after Asia Pacific, look, we can draw some, I would say, success from other regions, especially Indonesia, which is very, very big as a Satcom industry. Multiple players, unlike India, where you have pretty much, I would say, 3 or 4 Satcom players. Indonesia has tens of Satcom service providers. So it's very, very dynamic and really an open market, I would say, and where we have seen huge growth to a point where now the national digital initiative programs have become really the mainstay, government putting in money into their very, very high throughput satellites, and foreign operators really competing to stay, have an equal footing in that market. I feel, look, the broadband, I mean, one part is the consumer broadband, which has not taken off in this part of the world because of just by income disparity. But I think even enterprise, the adoption for cloud, digital transformation initiatives, the rollout of 5G, and just the data-rich applications that are being developed will continue to drive the demand for growth in consumption. But the consumption will definitely come at a certain price. The industry is seeing that, the disruption and the amount of investment. So SES is also reforming, right? I mean, the merger, as I would call it, rather than an acquisition with Intelsat is that step, right? That how do you now become more prominent in the industry and also gain efficiencies. Deepak mentioned about our focus in India. So not just the satellites authorization, making ourselves Indian company, billing from India, serving from India, but really building more than that. I mean, it's not, we don't see, like I think Mr. Goenka mentioned today morning, we don't see India as a market. It's more that we're leaning forward in building a software development center, creating meaningful, highly technical jobs in India, and really taking part in the reform which will follow. Thank you.
I think our Vikram is not coming. So the last panelist, Mr. Jitender Ahuja, he is head product and solutions, NELCO. Mr. Ahuja has been building and driving product strategy and roadmap, leading teams, commercial, finance and contract management, product development and management program, customer success, thought leadership, and network operation and management. Mr. Ahuja.
Thanks for giving this opportunity. I think much has been covered. I'll not take much of time. I don't repeat, but I think it's important, stage where we have come today. If you talk about 10 years back, we were talking about Satcom as purely as providing satellite connectivity. But government vision is much, much bigger. Both from the consumer perspective also, providing services to the consumers, and also from building and making best use of this and building it as an economy in itself. Look at the way that we have as an industry that, or as a industry economy that has been working out, evolved. It is not just providing satellite communication, it is about building space economy. From downstream, from upstream, for building applications, there's a full program that's being set to make best use of it, drive best result out of it. That government vision is much, much bigger, when we're talking about Satcom industry. Having said that, government is also working on making sure that connectivity is available to all. If you see the policy, and there's nothing wrong. You see the policy in last 10 years, government has provided all the support on the terrestrial side, to provide how the terrestrial network can reach to the last man standing, in terms of policies, in terms of providing the market access for data communications. But still, by providing all this support, still remote locations are not connected, which proves the point that one technology, can't, meet the mission of connectivity to all. Mix of technologies, be it Satcom, be it cellular, be it fiber, everything is needed to work together. Today, as we stand, still, if you see the divide between rural and urban areas, rural still 40% of the population in India don't have internet access. Where in urban, it is more than 120%. See the divide. And it can be only bridged with alternate technologies. It can't be just bridged with terrestrial. Its space economy, Satcom is very, very important, for India. Having said that, see, I think somewhere government has also recognized, policymakers have also recognized there are different personalities when we are talking about terrestrial, when we are talking about Satcom, and both are needed. See, every technology has different space. Terrestrial, it is of course economical, viable. It's quite handy. Cost perspective, it is very, very, I'll say economical as compared to Satcom. So Satcom and cellular, they are not competing. They are complementary, absolutely complementary. Wherever terrestrial is feasible, Satcom will never be there in terms of competing with it. It can be there as a backup, or for specific use cases, wherein Satcom specific characteristic, be it, easy feasibility, available everywhere, higher uptime, all those characteristics will make Satcom much more feasible or much more suitable than cellular network. So both have its own place and both have to work together. If you see today, in terms of technology, then when we talk about, and there has been discussion in the past that it should be technology neutral. Yes, it should be technology neutral from the application perspective, not from the spectrum management perspective. Spectrum has to specifically treat it, differently treat it for Satcom, differently treat it for terrestrial. I think somewhere, if we talk about 7 years before or 8 years before, there was always sort of confusion. There was always a thought process that how it has to be treated. More or less, it has been sorted out with all these supportive government policies that how the spectrum management for terrestrial has to be managed and how it has to be managed for Satcom. I think this is the time that we should make best use of various technologies, cellular, Satcom, and make sure the benefit of economic development reaches to the last man standing. I think rest will cover as part of the panel discussion. Thank you.
So that no single responsibility in today's world and in the role of being secretary. So we have a portrait which is close to 3,000 per year. There are video conversations coming up. There is new technology coming up on that. There is video from the CS. As a user, I think we need that the future would be convergence of technology on the fixed space, which is all, but also on the terrestrial network, the terrestrial and the non-terrestrial network, which includes the mobile operator. And we see the three different stages of integration. One is the core network, the mobile network, mobile operator network, core network, and the satellite network. Which today are two different islands. The future is guided to merge network common into this core network, which will have, therefore, a network management system which will be common across the board. So you will have a network of networks which will be on multiple objects, including Geo, app, as well as the network, and a common LMS. And the last part of this network that we are headed towards is and of course, I'm not talking about virtualized modems and software profiles that can be brought in. All of that would be a part of a common unified network. But I think the important part where satellite needs to really, as an industry, need to really work on is the edge node or the edge product, which will be able to converge across different multiple objects on the satellite side. So the same modem should be able to speak to a LEO, or a GEO satellite, but also should be able to accommodate a SIM card, which will then allow it to roam across a mobile network or across the LEO or the GEO. And I think that is where we are headed to in terms of our roadmap.
Yeah, I think Gaurav touched on that. The way that we think, and it's always happening. Yeah, I was covering that, where a seller is there, of course, it will first price. And secondly, use either as a backup or if seller is not there. On the application side, work has already started. Let's say, today on SG-LAN, using SG-LAN, user manage it that way, that, there are the high-value applications are there that is on destination network, wherein critical applications will be used that way. And the way that is going ahead, this convergence will happen where one terminal, will be able to do it. It will integrate a terminal with LTE and capability, no need for external box, and be able to manage, on seller and Satcom side, and on the kernel side, it will be able to, speak on multiple, it will be able to communicate on multiple, partners. I think this convergence is very important because from the customer perspective, he doesn't care about it. He doesn't care whether seller or whether it's Satcom, and it's up to us to build those solutions, as a standard product or as a bespoke solution. I think that's where we are headed, and I think it is something that is good for industry as well as well.
Yeah, so much has been said by Gaurav, but in terms of SES also sees our main growth drivers in the next, I would say, 5 to 10 years, being mobile backhauling, cloud adoption, the digital transformation, especially in the energy vertical. I mean, these segments are all growing multi-fold. And really, all this effort on the orchestration part on the ground is happening. The satellites are becoming, as you know, software-defined. The coverage and capacity and spectrum are becoming more dynamic that can be assigned as we go. And really on the ground side, the efforts we are going towards creating an open system and not really be dependent on closed systems and really building solutions where, I mean, it's not having a single terminal earlier having a single terminal for CA, WAN for the miracle, but now people are really talking about proper roaming terminal which can even do multi-orbit solution. And that's where we are heading. It's not there yet, but I think what SES is doing is delivering now multi-orbit solutions on our GEO and NEO fleet, but it's not that we are not integrating LEO where it makes sense as well, especially in the cruise vertical, where we are bringing them in for more of the lower SLA services and highly versatile capacity is needed where the ask is for very, very low latency.
Yeah,
I'd say the true convergence is in the direct to mobile space. With the 3GPP standards evolving and including Satcom and terrestrial in a common standard, I think that's going to be the biggest potential in India. When we even talk of connected in India, broadband in India, how many people saw a match online? All of them, 75% have done it on their devices, and that's their mobile handsets. So that's really the most relevant in India. When you go and see how a cellular tower is put, it's put at a point to get a maximum coverage. If you go to a remote area, they look for a hill because you want that coverage to be more. What a satellite platform like the LEO platforms are doing is putting a mobile tower or a BTS in the sky. And all it's doing is it's giving a spot which is a wider coverage so that you get a full signal. Even in all the programs and whenever any telco talks about coverage, it's always based on a fixed coverage where people are around the base station. The minute you go between spots of coverage, you have blackout spots. And that's the thing with satellite. There is no concept of blackout spots. And I think how much ever fiber you lay, it's always going to be around the path of fiber and it can never be uniform across the land. So I think that's where for a mobile network, without a satellite BTS in the sky, if you can call it that, you cannot get a universal coverage. And I think the standards that are coming out, and there are many ways to do it, you could either, like the satellite phones have now started supporting S-band, so you directly connect on that frequency, which is an MSS frequency, or it could be using the same frequencies which the mobile operators win in auctions, and that's what another model is. But whichever model you see, I think that is definitely going to be the most dominating convergence point, and where all these networks will come into one. The other part, of course, is backhaul, and backhaul has its own, elements, because I think in India, the biggest challenge on the business model is the rate for service is based on a urban connection. So if the average cost is 5 rupees per GB, and out of that 5 rupees per GB, that's your earning. So they want their cost to be 3 to 4 rupees per GB. And out of that 2 rupees per GB may be the cost they can afford in backhaul. I've not seen any satellite program which even in its long-term roadmap can talk about a cost per GB at 2 rupees. And if it's going to be higher than that, will the telco sell it at a loss? Will they go to a rural market and charge higher because the satellite backhaul cost is more there? That's not possible, because the irony is the affordability in rural India is lower. So the only way to make that business case work in a country like ours is the government has to step in and say, and not just the way they've been doing it for 2 years, for 5% of the sites. Nobody's going to deploy a network for 2 years only. And when the subsidy runs out, what do? So I think there's some, hard talk thinking. And that's what I think the government needs to address. One of the positives, sir, I'd like to say, just some of us have got invited by the new Honorable Minister to form a committee, which is called the Stakeholder Committee, to advise the government on the satellite ecosystem, especially on satellite communications, and what the ministry and DOT can do to actually listen to some of these points and enable policies which are long-term, right? It's all good what Jitender also said, building and wanting to do an economy, but if you heard the InSpace chairman and the ISRO chairman, they again said, where is the demand in the country, right? That has to be created, and without that, you'll have all this supply coming, and then, the funding will run out. So I feel these are all sort of interconnected. The promise is there, but I think it needs to be knit together end to end.
Thank you. Before I start, get on the next question, we have been joined by Mr. Vikram Tiwathia. I was wondering that because all others are satellite people, so it was becoming sort of 4-0 kind of day. Now we have one from terrestrial, so he can give little five. So Mr. Vikram Tiwathia is Deputy Director General COAI. COAI, as most of you must be knowing, that it's India's leading industry association for telecom, broadband, and digital services. Mr. Tiwathia interacts extensively with the ICT industry leadership and senior officials of TOT, METI, TRAI, and other government offices for regulatory and policy matters. So,
I'm good here. Thank you so much. Thank you, Gupta sir. We've worked together for many, many years, and it's so heartening to see folks from the defense and, the Air Force, Army. I wonder if there's a Navy officer as well. Navy's at the back, so great. Because between the armed forces, you're going to be anchor tenants for both terrestrial or mobile, considering the areas that you all work in, right? In fact, to begin with, I'm happy to share that already some satellite, let's say, connections have been deployed in the areas which you hear in the news at short notice by some of our members. So here's, I'm happy to pick up from one is the 3GPP part. So the good news is without standardization and the satellite signal actually getting consumed here, because the form factor in which, the form factor of the device over which you deliver a service in India will be predominantly the smartphone, right? So the importance of, let's say, SES or OneWeb or whoever, right? So there are four billionaires who invested, the money in these 4 satellite constellations, right? Now, on the other side, there's the thing about demand. So you got to smell where the money is, right? Where the demand. So if you can identify, as you were mentioning, or the ISRO chairman or in space people, I missed out the earlier version, but where is the demand? In the demand, who's putting the money on the table, right? Currently, we, brand ourselves that in India, data is the cheapest. It's a misnomer. It may be the cheapest. The good news is, a lot of onboarding has happened. India is #1 country in data consumption, 25 GB per phone. Can you just imagine it? The next nearest country is South Korea, which launched 5G maybe 4 or 5 years ahead of us, right? So here, the good news, huge demand, right? How do you deliver and cater and fulfill the demand? Which are the areas which are not covered? So terrestrial coverage of 4G or 5G, I mean, we hear it in the news, fastest 5G rollout ever since we launched it at the India Mobile Congress in 22. As on date, we have about near 450,000 5G base stations in about 700 districts. So is connectivity available? Answer, yes. Okay. 4G, India is in the top 5 countries for 4G availability. Good news. All of us in the telecom industry need to pat ourselves. So here comes the satellite guys now, right? So satellite would obviously, the money is not being put only to cover rural areas. Come on, they don't have the money neither in the US, nor in Australia, nor anywhere in the world, or no Africa, right? So the role of the government, as you mentioned, there's a huge kitty of the USO fund lying non-utilized. So if you have to provide connectivity in areas such as, the border areas, rural areas. So there is a good case of how do you design a project or a plan to offer, let's say funding for non-viable areas. That is one part I thought I'd just cover. Of course, you've got more questions. The other very important part which doesn't get, addressed or where the government really needs to focus is, we've got 200 million, right? 200 million subscribers on a feature phone. They're in the rural areas, right? What we need to do is convert these guys into a minimum smartphone. And if the smartphone with 3GPP specs, release 17 onwards coming in, you can receive a satellite signal. The cost of that device has to come down. Otherwise, in India, those 200 million people are outside whatever kind we may invest in, whichever kind of network, you can call it Sky Bridge or whatever, right? So I'll just leave it at that and happy to take whatever other points that are there from Gupta sir.
Thank you. Our next question is, how can what policy and regulatory framework needs to be enhanced in India, I'm talking about India, to promote the adoption of satellite communication technologies? What incentives are needed to encourage investment in satellite infrastructure and services? So, Mr. Peng, are you hearing me?
Yes, I can hear.
Did you hear the question?
I can't hear very well from the room when you speak from your handheld microphone. Can you repeat the question?
Okay, I'll repeat it again. What policy and regulatory frameworks needs to be enhanced to promote the adoption of satellite communication technologies in India? What incentives are needed to encourage investment in satellite infrastructure and services? Would you like to
take up the question? Thank you, sir. I think I understand a little bit the question, but I think there's many things that is at play, especially for kind of a renewed kind of industry such as satellites. Also, satellite licensing framework has been there for like last 30 years. There's many kind of new development and new technology. But I think India is doing a very good play an important, crucial role in this. And with the latest kind of guideline on the implementation of the India space policy that came out, I think, a few months ago, I think that is really showing the way for the satellite industry on how to do business in India, which is extremely important. I think the next step is really to look at what I was presenting in my keynote is really this convergence, where we have a mixture between a converged ecosystem between both mobile, terrestrial mobile, and also the satellite industry. Then the kind of the regulatory boundary is a little bit more blurred. So as you heard, there's many kind of talk about recent US FCC regulatory framework about supplemental coverage from the sky and from the space, which is allowing the satellite companies to use terrestrial mobile spectrum to provide coverage in places where there's no mobile base station. So basically make a more efficient use of the spectrum. And this is a model that many countries are looking at, and that could lead to some development of the ecosystem, this converged ecosystem that I was talking about earlier. And as my friend Vikram was saying that before, it's like the cost of the smartphone is definitely going to be a huge kind of a factor on the adoption of the kind of the coverage from the satellites, and how normal population, especially rural population, can afford these kind of devices for using the kind of the satellite connectivity. However, in some variants of direct-to-device, you can definitely use the existing smartphone because it will be using the existing kind of IMT spectrum in places where there's no mobile coverage. So there are new evolution, new technology that is need to be to have a correct framework, a regulatory framework to developing further. So I think there's many things like this that we can look at, especially for India. So thank you.
Look, the space policy and the NGP guidelines are very positive and they are a step in the right direction. But I think going into the very remote or rural areas, like Shivaji said, there is support needed from the government, and really the spectrum part is where satellite operators or satellite service providers are a bit struggling at the moment. I hope the spectrum policy that comes out is fair, the allocation process is transparent. I think the NGSO constellations, by the nature of it, will require access to spectrum on the gateways. So we will have to look at some exclusion zones around these gateways where they can get access to a large spectrum on K and the future Q and D bands. I think really government support and a transparent spectrum allocation policy is So, in fact, I was thinking that I will pick up on this initial example of Indonesia, but since you've not done it, let me add to that. So, if there is something that the policy part in India, the regulatory framework in India can learn from some other countries, I think Indonesia is a classic shining example where the USO broadband fund, the USO fund, it has been deployed in a way which is very transparent and allows the industry to have a clear roadmap. Now, this is something that India can really learn out of. And a recent example is the RFP from the government NELCO. It came as a sudden surprise as to so much capacity is needed, which is funded by the Universal Fund, and then the industry is not able to cope up with it. So there is huge demand, there is a huge fund, as Vikram mentioned, available with the government to be used for connectivity of the rural population in India. I was looking at the TRAI indicators. It's just 43% of rural internet penetration today. And if you see the growth in the last 3 years, TRAI indicators over the last 3 years, you will see that the rural penetration is increasing at a 0.3 rate of less than 5%. That can improve dramatically if the policy is made clear and the long-term roadmap is developed, wherein the satellite service providers are told that this is the vision for the next 10 years. You need to provide a supply which is consistent for rural deployment, and then over the next 10 years, as there could be an Indian service provider who will bring in their own satellite. That's fine. So long as there is a clear roadmap available to satellite service provider to deploy capital so that there is capacity generated over India for a specific purpose. I think that's missing.
You have heard something or should we go on? Okay. Just give me 5 minutes more and then I'll open it. Last question I'll ask. Administrative licensing of satellite spectrum is considered the best practice globally. How can India implement a transparent administrative process for shared spectrum use among service providers? Who would like to go first?
Well, it's the way it's always been allocated in India. So it's not that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. The spectrum has been given administratively, and I think the the new telecom bill which came out in December puts the matter to rest in terms of the methodology. Now, the second element is what should be the charging basis, and there's 2 charging basis which is prevalent. The majority is based on a revenue share formula, and that's sort of a win-win because it's very similar to what the telecom licensing regime is. The telecom licensing regime is 8% of your gross revenue goes to the government as a license fee, and the spectrum charging was 4%, which goes to the government as a spectrum fee. So in that way, both the spectrum as well as the core license were stakeholders in the success of the industry and proportionate to the revenues earned, not the profitability on the gross revenues. So that's really I'll say the obvious method to follow. Within that, there are discussions on, because I think there's dialogue that there's, the way the satellite ecosystem is evolving, whether the spectrum or the services start looking more like mobile services from the sky or not. I think that part of dialogue is on, and I think it's premature to say what's right, what's wrong. But as long as the principle is based on the business model and the charging is based on what can make it affordable, because we must understand any spectrum cost or license cost or GST cost at the end of the day passes on to an end user, and that should be kept in mind while doing this. I'd also say that, I remember the Mobile World Congress, the SES Empower system had its first demo trial, and that's now 8-9 months back. OneWeb, I think it's 3-4 months since they've done the demo trial and the services are ready. I think the government must find a way to continue to award at least interim or provisional or whatever short-term spectrum so that services can get going. all these NGSO systems have a shorter shelf life and the demand is very high. I think looking at all the armed forces here, I can say for certain, it's one of the sectors of the economy which is most dependent on satellite communication, and they've been the most starved of satellite communication. I know that they have large networks, 200 terminals, sharing a 9 megahertz of spectrum, and when you're now competing with foreign military, which is actually leveraging very high capacity, all kinds of networks, integrated wireless and private 5G networks. You can't have the backhaul on a flimsy kbps model. So I'll say for the sake of, I think many, I'll say more for national security, there has to be some interim measure. And at least in the B2B space, which I think the Empower service and OneWeb service are, they both can't commercially fit into a B2C space. I think that's the one urgent request. If you're ever summarizing, sir, that should go out to the regulators, because that's something which is benefiting no one.
I think I'll ask Vikram. Okay, no, first, and then, so Mr. Vikram Tiwathia.
So spectrum is never easy, right? We have, wireless member of the Radio Regulation Board, Mr. Garg is right here. So spectrum, obviously, because, there's competing interests on how do you use the spectrum. And of course, the shelf life is, if I use it at this instance, I use it. If I don't use it at this instance, means, that's lost. Okay. So the fact is that the available spectrum must be put to the most optimum use. The spectrum auction is on. We are tracking it. The day one, 3 rounds, I think 4 or 5 rounds happened yesterday. So obviously there's hardly much demand in the current, let's say, terrestrial spectrum. That is. Now, the Telecom Act has put together, a list of entities of, purposes for use of the allocation of spectrum. So right now it's a bit early days. Yes, very, discussions are on as to how do you put the spectrum allocation, pricing. It's open right now. And I'm sure, from a national perspective, based on what demand or what service has to be delivered, I'm sure the regulator and the WPC or DOT will, take that into account. It's an ongoing discussion. I'm sure, a good outcome is what we foresee will come up.
Yeah, thanks. And with that, all the government has been already largely that Satcom will be administrated. And the reason is obvious, as I was talking that you can't compare other governments because Satcom has different personalities, different technology, the way it works. The way that you want to drive the economic mandate, of using various technologies. You can't, keep at par with respect to spectrum management or technology are similar. It has to be friendly government is rightly taking decisions administrative. And, I think Shri already told that many cases is the right method because, if you compare the kind of revenues that are generated, the absolute value that is put on spectrum by cellular operator versus spectrum players can't compare. Because the kind of percentage that they get on, but they pay for spectrum is a very small percentage. It means the overall revenue of cellular system. If similar kind of thing would have been there for spectrum, you need not do. So I think that thing has to be kept in mind. And I think government has to be a solution when it is right way. I think I'd like to add another thing that we are talking about, this aspect, considering KU, KU, LNSN is also, which is that government should open up, because when we're talking about spectrum management, and deciding price for spectrum. L and S band, which has been kept, away from commercial service providers, that also the government should open up to provide commercial services. Okay, I'll make one small comment. Despite being a satellite industry professional, I'm going to play devil's advocate and live everything now. This is to Shivaji's comment and Jitinder's comment. In the initial remarks, Shivaji, you mentioned D2H, direct to mobile, direct to handset is going to be the game changer in the future. If that is indeed the case, though there are differing ideas, and I do agree with what you said, revenue share is one, but if satellite starts using spectrum to deliver services directly to the mobile, would you not say that this is a service similar to providing a mobile service? And therefore, if the mobile operator is paying for spectrum to an auction, there is a merit in the argument that why should there be a difference in the valuation of spectrum. But that said, of course, there are differing viewpoints. I would also cite from a satellite standpoint as to saying that the satellite industry is not as large as the mobile industry, and therefore a revenue share could be a good idea. But of course, we look at TRAI consultations with government as to come out with a balanced approach, especially around this topic. What we are providing services today is more enterprise-driven, more PSATs-driven, which are terminals itself, which are not mobile handsets. There's a long way to go for delivering broadband from satellite to a handset. We are seeing the first innovators trying to develop that technology, and we will have more to say on this.
I think I have to answer. Just 1 minute. Half a minute. Yeah, the irony is today there's one mobile service available in India, direct to satellite, and the spectrum charge for that is 1% compared to 4% which you regularly pay. So that's the BSNL Inmarsat service. So it's all about what is the rate. If you're charging 250 rupees a minute, then you have to put the rates in those proportion. The biggest part, I think, which has to hit home is when you're buying something in an auction, it has to be yours. That's why you pay for. In satellite, the biggest thing is it's like Wi-Fi. The spectrum is common to everybody. There can be unlimited amount of players using it like we use on the Geo side. And I think that's the big difference in terms of an auction methodology. In terms of revenue share, even today, if you provide a service up to 512 kbps, you pay 3% spectrum charge. If you give a higher bandwidth, you pay 4%. So that methodology is already there. It's only not that public, so there are a lot of opinions formed, but it all exists and the government has certain strong basis. And I think the TRAI will come out with a consultation paper very shortly.
30 seconds. So I think just to look at to mobile, we are never talking about delivering 100 Mbps or project to mobile. We are primarily talking about IoT kind of low speed. Because we're talking about direct to mobile in more like say S-band, L-band, because you can't deliver 100 Mbps, from mobile on Satcom. So that way it is not competing with cellular. The use cases are again very, very different. That is way that has to look at when you talk about direct to mobile. Not from broadband, direct to mobile, which is more like say, low bandwidth IoT.
Okay. Now we'll take question from the audience. Okay. Next question you can update.
Okay, very interesting session. So I'll just give 3 quick points. Direct to handset is a defense requirement. I mean, it is a game-changing requirement which is required. Second is Mr. Vikram mentioned about remote area and the cost would be high. Again, I would mention that it is again a defense requirement. The remote, this thing can be obviated because it is a defense requirement. It can be dual case because in those areas, because of the heights, and I think everybody knows terrestrial doesn't work, your radio doesn't work. It is only the thing. Third is a question, since HAPS was mentioned, the drones who have come in, and if you're following the various conflicts which are going around now recently, the drones have changed a lot of things, even in commercial. Do you feel HAPS would be something what drones have done to, of course, it doesn't take away the role of satellites, it doesn't take away this thing, because in defense warfighting, what you need is something which is closer to the earth, which is static, which will give you communication, ISR resolution would be better. So, in that sense, HAPS is a better option. So, and of course, it will be cheaper. There's no launch mechanisms required, and thing is reusable. And, you can send as many as then, and time also is launch. So, do you think at some point in time, the way drones have changed warfighting strategy, the satellites would be replaced by HAPS?
Especially with the geopolitical tensions in South China Sea and others. So we have started to, in some of the countries, COAI and having services with empowered medium of constellations with a higher throughput from their drones. We tend to send ultra HD videos and also low latency, legally with the apps. For us, we are looking at apps in the future. Generally, I don't think we're looking at a government vertical to be the big driver for it. But direct to device, yes, from the consumer point of view, consumer broadband, we're looking at that. But that's very interesting thought that you put that the government would be a big driver for that. Okay, last question.
I want to ask a question. Hello, are you able to hear me? Yeah, I am SP Purwar, was with DOT till 2002. After that, I am a lawyer, and I have been working for Sagar Associates, one of the leading law firms of the country. Now, my question is to the four on the dais, neither to Vikram nor to Sudhir. It is four operators, Satcom operators. It is about the challenges posed by LIM, lawful intercept and monitoring requirements. What challenges do you face in meeting those requirements? That is first. Second, what is the cost that is added on account of meeting these requirements?
So this is a challenging question, but I'm attempting an answer. I hope there is no security agency here. We have implemented a couple of networks in the last few years, where we have gone through this process of implementing this lawful intercept to whatever hardware software. There is an additional cost to this, for sure. There are a few countries which have similar requirements. India is not alone in that requirement that we have. But then the way in which the Indian security agencies ask for that data, it does mean that there is a cost associated to that, which impacts our overall business. That's the second part of it. The first part is how difficult it is. I think some of the expectations of the agencies are a bit difficult to implement technically. So while there is a huge amount of technology on the satellite space, on the IT space, the expectation is that if the agency comes back and says, I need to know on so and so day who was the end user, I think that's the wrong expectation to have. As a service provider, whether it is us as satellite provider or the service provider on the ground who has a license, it is almost impossible to say who in an ISP at an internet cafe, who came in and who used a particular IP address. We can track the IP address, but we can't track the user who used the IP address. And this is true for an internet cafe or a maritime vessel or anything. Right? Now you can track back and try and find out who the user could be, but the expectation has to be brought down to the level where there is a
there is a non-technology process or an administrative process to get to the user who uses an IP address. And I think that is where there is a mismatch in the expectation. I hope that.
Okay, the last question, Mr. Gaurav.
Thank you, Sudhir. Can you hear me? Yeah. No, I just want to make a brief comment about the spectrum issue. As was mentioned by, I think, almost everybody, the spectrum for satellite services has a very unique situation as such. Besides other aspects, one thing which all of us need to keep in mind, of course we know, but we need to bring it out very clearly, that the spectrum for Satcom services, satellite services, is linked with orbit. So it's always, internationally also, it's termed as orbit spectrum resource. Spectrum alone is not sufficient for Satcom services, and orbits alone cannot provide the service as such. So it's a combined orbit spectrum resource, and orbits are controlled by ITU at the international level. They are not within the control of the national administration. So that's why this is a unique feature of the spectrum for Satcom services, which we should keep in mind when we are comparing spectrum for terrestrial services. So if we are comparing with that, we are not comparing apples with apples, we are comparing apples and oranges. That's the only thing. Thank you.
For allowing me to ask this question, and thanks to the organizing committee to allowing me to attend. So coming to the question, 12 years ago, internet was a rich man's luxury, but by now, almost in India, there are most of the population is using the internet, and after Jio and BSNL, other service providers, when they came in, they gave a much cheaper service to the internet, and within 10 to 15 years, we are expecting to quadruple this internet penetration. But with such a low frequency range and such high amount of users when there's the internet, how are we expecting to say use this amount of frequency to have about 10 billion people using the internet?
I get your name. What's the name?
Venkat Raman Patnaik.
Hey, Venkat. So, Tiwathia, firstly, it's so heartening to notice that you are tracking the mobile internet space. So, for India particularly, the good news is that, as I mentioned, every smartphone user, because you can access the internet only if you have a smartphone. I mean, besides the laptop and other stuff, but majority of the consumption will be on a smartphone. Okay?
Yes.
At the cost of repetition, 200 million people don't have a smartphone in India. So that is one priority for the government to address as to how to move those 200 million folks onto the internet. Because, the government, if you have been seeing, not just the government, but everybody saying, ultimately, how do you get something to do? It is an app. Otherwise, this is like a paperweight.
Yes.
What you do with the phone, unless there is an app, and through that app, you're actually able to get a service. Right?
Yes.
So, in terms of growth and building up further, let's say, penetration of the internet in India, these are 2-3 areas. Reduce the cost of the device, coverage will happen, but that is one major focus. Do you own a smartphone, by the way?
Not personally, but my parents do.
That's nice, yeah. But,
Thank you, sir.
So, I think we have gone beyond time. So, we'll close this session, and thank you, all of you, for the wonderful session and very educational and inspiring talks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, and thank you all, the gentlemen over here. This indeed was an interesting and a power-packed session for all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for the wonderful panel here. I would now like to request Mr. Sudhir Gupta to kindly present a memento to all our panelists as a token of love and appreciation. Firstly, to Mr. Vikram Tiwathia, sir. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
And thank you, Peng, also. Sorry, I missed you out.
Mr. Shivaji Chatterjee. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Mr. Gaurav Kharod. Thank you, sir. Mr. Harsh Verma. Thank you, sir. Mr. Jitender Ahuja. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. And I would like to request Ms. Gupta Bhera, Director Communications, SIA-INDIA, to please join us on stage and present a memento to our wonderful chair, Mr. Sudhir Gupta. Thank you, sir. I once again thank all our panels for joining us today, and Mr. Peng Zhao for joining us virtually. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, there are other sessions also going on in the other halls, which is CBR 1, Regency, and Regal. So request you all, in case you all want to join us for the other sessions, you all can. And I would now request everyone to please join us for lunch, and requesting the panel to please come for a good photograph in the front. Thank you.